welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing the profile of a reader book tag. This feels like a really perfect tag to do because I have a couple videos that have kind of like blown up a little bit in popularity over the past month and a half, so there's actually quite a few new faces here, and so this is a good kind of like introduction to some of my reading tastes, although there's quite a few questions on here about things that I don't know if I have ever actually answered this on my channel before, as well as some things about like what I am currently reading, so it's kind of a good snapshot. So the first question is, what for you makes a good book? So earlier this year, I did a video where I went through my 5-star reads on Goodreads and kind of tried to find some commonality with some of those books. And I found that a lot of my 5-star reads had some of the same things in common, where they either were full of wise or beautiful words, usually both. Really strong character development to where I feel like I know the characters, so I prefer a much more character-based book than a plot-based book, because there could be a lot happening in the plot. It could be like edge of your seat, but if I don't care about the characters, then I usually don't care what's happening to them. And the last component is a strong sense of place, so the setting of the book to feel very real and very vibrant, and that particularly resonates with me if it's in a nature setting and has beautiful nature writing that's very descriptive, then that usually bumps a book quite a bit up for me as well. Question number 2 is, what are you currently reading? I am currently going through a Sanderson fest, it feels like. I am reading Shadows of Self. I do have it physically, but I'm reading it on my Kindle at bedtime. This is book 2 of era 2 of the Mistborn series, and I'm currently hosting a read-along of the Mistborn series on my channel, where we've been reading one book a month, so this is that book. Then I'm also buddy reading with my friend Whitney Drew. We are going through the Skyward series because our in-person book club read Skyward together in July, and neither Whitney or I had actually finished the Skyward series, so we decided we were going to continue on together. So Starsight is my current audiobook. And then my main physical book right now is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is my 3rd time reading this book. It's one of my favorite books of all time and the book that introduced me to Russian literature. I've been reading along with a group of people in my Discord, and that has been really, really fun. Question number 3 is, what's the last book you DNF'd and why? So I did a thing last month where I was trying to judge books by their covers because of Summer Book Bingo. That was a prompt on my Summer Book Bingo board this year. I ended up going with a book that I didn't love, but I really loved like the first chapter, and so that's why I went with that one. And I had held on to another one of the books because I still really liked it, wanted to try it again, and that book was A Magic Steeped in Poison. It's a YA fantasy, and it's really, everything is based on like tea-based magic, which is super cool and sounded super fascinating and really unique, the magic system. And it was, except there seemed to be like no parameters as to how or why the magic was working, and I got like 62% of the way through and felt absolutely zero connection to any of the characters at all, and it just was feeling like really boring, and I was having to force myself to read it. And finally I was like, you know what, this is not a buddy read. I am not committed to read this, so I'm just not gonna finish it, and I didn't. It's unfortunate because it was a really unique and cool premise, but the execution just wasn't working for me for some reason. Question number 4 is, what obscure book do you wish other people would read? So this is a tricky question for me because obscure is a relative term, and if you have been watching my channel for very long, you know that I really love classics, and I read a lot of classics and backlisted books and not a lot of new releases or like indie pub books or anything like that. So I don't know how obscure these are that I'm going to recommend, but they are books that I don't hear people talk about very frequently. So I'm going to recommend The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. I read this earlier this year during Feb Regency, thinking it was written during the Regency time period, but it actually predates Regency time period by just a little bit. But anyways, this is a book about a vicar and his family who fall on hard times, And I just really loved the family interactions in it. I loved the main character of the vicar and just enjoyed the book as a whole. And it's just not a book that I hear people mention very often. I hear people mention Anne Bronte, you know, semi-frequently. I think she's the least mentioned of the Bronte sisters, at least in my personal experience. But when I hear people mention Anne Bronte, they're talking about The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. And I don't hear people talk about Agnes Grey very much, which is really a shame. Agnes Grey is a lot shorter than Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and it was my favorite fiction read of last year. It's about a young girl, and her family also falls on hard times, much like Vicar of Wakefield, and so the members of the family need to find a way to contribute financially. And so she, as the youngest daughter, goes off to be a governess, and she has like a wonderful home life with wonderful family, but then the families that she ends up working for are really terrible. But I just really love the character of Agnes Grey, and I especially love the person that she ends up falling in love with, because she falls in love with him for his character and his kindness to others rather than it being a physical attraction or her being attracted to his wealth. And so I just really loved it. And lastly, I will recommend a book that is from an indie pub house that probably is lesser known. I love them to death though. You've heard me probably talk about Owl's Nest Publishers, and they publish middle grade and YA books, and I just love them. I think the quality of what they produce is absolutely amazing. And actually I just did a vlog for National Read a Book Day where I read one of their latest books that's coming out in October and really enjoyed being able to read that. But my favorite book so far that Owl's Nest Publishers has put out is Orion and the Starborn. This is actually the first in a trilogy, so maybe I shouldn't be recommending it to you because it's not a complete trilogy yet, but book 2 is actually coming out this winter, I think, but I really, really loved this. It's a story about a young boy who feels like he just doesn't fit in on Earth. Like he feels like he has no place where he belongs, and he ends up finding out that he's actually not from Earth, that there is this other solar system that he is actually from, and he's able to go back there and go to school there. And it's kind of it feels like a mix of fantasy and sci-fi, because it feels like very technological, but it also feels like kind of magical as well. And I love a magical school trope in general, so him going to a school and learning about a history of worlds he's never known and abilities that he might have and technology that exists there that doesn't exist on Earth. I just really loved it, and I absolutely cannot wait for book 2 to come out. Question number 5 is, what is the longest book that you've ever read? And I think that this is kind of a toss-up, because I have 2 books that are really, really long, giant books that I have read, and it just depends on what edition you have, which one is longer. So I have read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, and I've also read Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And some sources will say that these books are around 1,200 pages, some will say 1,400 pages. So I think it just depends on the edition, but the 2 editions that I have, Les Mis is the longer of the 2, but those are like some of my crowning achievements in length of book. Question number 6, if you could have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would they be? And this is really difficult for me, because if I'm gonna have dinner with people, I either want to have really deep conversations or I want to laugh a whole bunch. And so it just depends like what I'm going to be in the mood for. But I really think that I want to have dinner with people who are actually all in the same book. So it's not really 5 separate characters. So I don't know if that's cheating, but I would really love to have dinner with Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin, and that's only 4, so I need to come up with someone else. I don't know, maybe Bilbo, but I would love to have dinner with hobbits for several reasons. First of all, that they are going to have really high quality, delicious food. They are going to have lots of laughter, lots of joy, and they seem like they're all really good at storytelling, and so I feel like there would be lots of wonderful conversation had and lots of laughter. So if I could have dinner with any fictional character, I'd want it to be them. Question number 5. What are 5 books you'd want if you were stranded on a desert island? This is the most generous version of this question I've ever seen. Usually it's 3 books. 5 books feels so generous, and yet I'm still going to take advantage of it. And I'll show you how. First of all, book number 1 is the Bible, because that is just a given. I read that every single day. But my next book would be Lord of the Rings. And you may say to yourself, but Tiffany, Lord of the Rings is 3 books. Not if you have the version that has all 3 books in one, and I do. It's right there. So I would bring that exact book with me, along with this book, which has all 7 of Jane Austen's novels in it. So I would bring this one as well. And I would also bring my collection of all of Poe's works. I have a book that has all of his stories and poetry and all of that stuff. So that's all kind of cheating because it has multiple works in there. But if I can only bring a certain amount of books with me, I want to bring a whole bunch of books that have some variety in it. And I feel like stylistically, all of these are very different. We've got the wisdom of the Bible. We have some really wonderful written passages in Lord of the Rings that are beautiful and wise and encouraging and uplifting. We have the humor of Jane Austen. And then we kind of have like some more spooky stuff with Poe, which also is very thought-provoking as well. So then for book number 5, I'm going to be practical and say that I would want a plant guide that would include plants that are in the area wherever this deserted island is, so that way I can ascertain which plants are poisonous and which ones I can eat. Question number 8 is one book you've read that you could not put down. And I will admit that I have not had very many books this year that have felt like that, unfortunately. I feel like I've enjoyed a lot of things that I've read, but I've had to make myself sit down and read them rather than, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get back to them. An exception to this was 9 Coaches Waiting by Mary Stewart, which I read with my Patreon in the month of July. And oh my word, this is the first time in such a long time that I read a book that I just devoured, and I wanted to shirk all my obligations and just sit and read. And it was so wonderful to find a book that made me feel that way. This book is a gothic mystery about a governess who ends up moving to this family in France to care for a small boy, and something just feels like very ominous and not quite right while she's there. And as time progresses, she uncovers some plots and some other things, and it is just so good. I actually put it on my list of books to recommend to read in the fall, so if you haven't read it yet, now's a great time. Question number 9, what are 5 books or authors you will never read? I mean, you should never say never, I guess, but the first book that comes to mind is Lolita. Every time I hear this book mentioned, I'm like, nope, absolutely not. I also am very sensitive to certain content, and so as a result, I know that there are some books and authors that I just will never pick up because they will end up feeling too much for me and end up being like ingrained in my head, and I have a hard time getting it out of my brain. So one book that comes to mind is A Little Life. I know enough about this book to know how horrifically sad it is and know that it's just something that I would not be able to handle. And I think I would put Colleen Hoover in this category as well. And she's super popular. I haven't read anything by her, and I don't want to knock an author just because she's super popular, but you know, I feel like the hate level for Colleen Hoover is also pretty high. So I hear some people say like, oh my gosh, she's the best ever, and some people say like, she's the worst ever. But I know that she deals with some very sensitive issues and topics in her books, and I would not be able to read them. Also, at the risk at making me feel like I am just criticizing popular books, I would never read any of the ACOTAR books. Part of that is just because I'm not a person that really enjoys reading any sort of smut whatsoever, really. It just feels really awkward to me, and I don't know, it just always feels super cringy to me. But even besides that, I've read little excerpts of Sarah J. Maas's writing style, and I can just tell that she's not for me. And lastly is an author that I said I would never read many times. I'm starting to like backpedal on this a little bit, and that's James Joyce. I actually did buy Dubliners. I think it was either this year or last year, and might want to try Dubliners, but I still don't know if I can ever face Ulysses. It's just so scary to me, and I don't know if would even be worth my time. I really struggle with stream of consciousness writing, and so I I don't know, but I know that Dubliners is different, so I may still at some point be brave enough to give that a try because it is a collection of short stories. But Ulysses, I don't know. Lastly, question number 10, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? I would love to say that if I wrote a book, it would be a fantasy, because that just sounds so imaginative, so fun, so immersive. But honestly, I just don't know if I'm creative enough to come up with like a whole world. Usually when I sit down and write something, which these days is very infrequent, it is often something that is spiritually beneficial or uplifting to the Christian faith. So if I actually ever published a book, it would probably be a Christian nonfiction. But I really doubt that I will ever do that, which is really funny because I used to write a lot when I was younger, like a lot, constantly. And I remember as a kid, my number one thing that I would say when people asked what I wanted to be when I grew up was an author. And now I almost never write. Anyways, that is the profile of a reader tag. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you would like to answer some of these questions, like I said, they are in the description of the video, but I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about me that maybe you didn't know before, and I would love to hear from you so I could learn a little bit from you as well. If you have a booktube channel and have not done this tag, feel free to consider yourself tagged, and I look forward to seeing your answers whenever you do it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.